This episode is sponsored by Apollo, a tool that's helping me to open doors and close deals faster. Wanted to share it with you. Apollo is a complete end-to-end sales platform, letting you email, dial, connect on social, build plays, and schedule meetings. With conversational intelligence transcribing my calls lately and reminding me to act on my next steps to drive deals across the finish line, it's been a lifesaver. It's no wonder Apollo is the most loved sales tool on the planet. Thousands of users rank Apollo as a top tool on G2. Start today completely free and see how Jesse and I use Apollo. Sign up in the show notes below or at thesalesplayers.com/Apollo. That's thesalesplayers.com/APOLLO to start your free trial.
If you do any prospecting with LinkedIn, you have got to go get set up with Surf. That's SURFE. It's a tool you can use to add new contacts to your CRM system directly from LinkedIn in seconds. I'm using it every single day. I add contacts, follow my deals, keep track of notes, and it ends up saving me a bunch of time on prospecting and outreach, which means I can spend more time moving my deals along. The data is always 100% accurate since I don't have to copy and paste all the fields over from each and every contact that I want to put in my CRM. Instead, Surf does that all automatically with just one click in about 60 seconds. The team over at Surf has put together a very special offer for fans of sales players. There's a link down in the show notes, and you can use the promo code JWSURF5. Don't forget the E at the end of Surf. That's JWSURF5 for 5% off your first year. Don't spend another minute doing things manually. Go get set up with Surf. We were brainstorming episode ideas on the fly here, and we're getting a lot of questions right now in both our community and from folks in our network about how to survive a layoff, what to do if you're impacted, what's to come. We don't have a crystal ball, so we can't really say what's to come. I think the next several months are going to be interesting still in tech. We're not quite out of the woods from just some financial stuff and additional layoffs going on. So Chase and I thought we'd just put together a quick episode talking through some things you can do if, say, you were laid off tomorrow in tech selling or any kind of sales role. How can you get back on your feet as quickly as possible? And maybe Chase, you want to kick it off with a couple of ideas. Start with your first idea. It sounds like you had a few ideas written down. Share what you do right away if you got laid off.
The first thing that I would do is go to my network within LinkedIn and start to reach out to people that I am connected to and start to look through job postings there. But there's a few different websites that I always look at, and that's ycombinator.com//jobs. And then also wellfound.com is another one where you can start to find sales jobs. And then there's other VC funds like M25 VC is a fund. Also High Alpha is another fund. So they have a bunch of different companies that are always looking for roles. So you can go to these websites and connect with people there. Also, another thing that I would do is connect with any type of sales communities like the Sales Players, GTM United. I just joined 8 Straight, which is another sales community, and just start to reach out to your friends.
Yeah. So to recap, using your professional network, finding other sort of niche networks, and then reaching out to, you said colleagues?
Colleagues, yep. And making sure that you got a good resume. I think that that's one thing that you want to make sure that's updated. Make sure that you have a clear path, that your LinkedIn profile is optimized. And also, whenever you get those recruiters reaching out to you, even if they reached out to you maybe 6 months, 3 months ago, hit them back up, you know?
Yeah, that's okay. So these are good. These are part of my playbook that I'd use also if I were to get, walked out tomorrow.
What's your parachute strategy, Jesse?
So I'm going to take a different approach, and I'm going to say week 1, day 1, month 1, whatever your situation is, take a little time to decompress. it's really traumatic to get laid off. It's not fun. You can feel a range of different emotions. It can feel like you failed. A lot of times this is completely out of your control. It has nothing to do about your work product or your value as a professional or a seller or anything like that. So I think it's really important people actually try to slow it down a little bit after they get laid off. It's hard to do especially if you're early in your career and you don't have any reserves built up. You've probably got to go make some quick moves to find your next thing. But I would take some time to kind of assess what your situation is. So do you get unemployment? Is there, a severance package associated with the layoff? What were some of those details? Do you have healthcare? Some of those kind of financial things that you want to have in place. I just assess where you're at with that. One of the things I've done in the past in this situation is you put together a budget and make sure that you're realistic about what your runway is. How much do you have on hand? So kind of get your house in order first is my recommendation. And then as best as you can, take some time to just really decompress. Go on a trip if you are able to. Spend some time outdoors. All of those things are places I've been and, strategies I've used to just decompress and get back on my feet mentally, because so much of this game is mindset and headspace and all that stuff. And so you don't want to neglect that. You don't want to rush out to the next thing if you don't have to. A lot of times, especially early in my career, I had to rush to the next thing. So totally understand if you're in a situation. If you are in that situation, something you can do, and we talked about this on the episode about building wealth as a seller, start putting aside, some kind of an emergency fund.
Yep.
Start with $1,000, $2,000 if you can. And then from there, try to build it up to 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months of runway. So be able to cover your bills for at least 6 months, right? This is a good goal. Longer than that, it's even better. And in this business, what I've found is you have one good sale, a good commission check. Maybe you have a signing bonus or something from a job that you get. I would bank that, put it away somewhere so you have it for a rainy day. And then that will give you more leverage if and when you do get laid off, you have a little more time to find the next move for you that's right. Because it's a huge luxury to be able to say, hey, I got laid off, but I've got plenty of time to go find the right company to work for or the right thing to work on, versus having to rush out and say, I've only got a month worth of runway and I got to go find something before the end of the month, because that's honestly not realistic. The best roles at least for the tech sales business, and I think in most of B2B sales, it's going to take at least 6 weeks to interview and get through all the rounds of interviews and applications and all that stuff. It's probably going to take a lot longer, honestly, especially in this market. It's probably going to take maybe 3 months, 4 months. And so if you can survive on, what you have in the bank for those 3 or 4 months, and you can slow down everything, that's my recommendation. So I know maybe not everybody's there yet, but if you're listening to this and you are employed, think about ways you can start to set aside a little bit more so that if and when a rainy day comes, you've got some cash set aside for runway there and you can go find the next right move for you.
I got a couple thoughts on what you just said, Jesse. And
yeah,
me as a recovering entrepreneur turned SaaS sales executive, I didn't know about this with my first job when I moved to another role. PTO. So one of the things that you can do is stack PTO and not take that time. And basically the number of PTO hours is when you are either let go or you leave a company, they have to pay you out all at once. So that can be a backup plan. Also, you can do DoorDash, do any type of gig job. There are the ability to still look for jobs, but still bring in some cash. So I'd recommend, looking for a side hustle to bring in some other money, so you're not just living fully off savings.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea. I've done things like that before. I used to drive Uber Eats, did deliveries when I was living in Austin, and was at the time, I don't know how things are now. This was several years ago, but it was actually like a significant amount of money a month you could make doing that. And at the time, gas was a little cheaper too, especially in Texas. But it took a nice, I guess it helped a lot in terms of runway in a period several years ago where I was in between roles, and it gave me some time to slow down a little bit and find the next right thing for me. So yeah, doing like a Uber Eats or a DoorDash or whatever, those are things you can do. Also, something that I've seen done, especially a lot in the last year with all these layoffs, is freelancing. Is there some skill set you have today from your role in sales that you can sell to a company or another person? It helps to have an audience. It helps to have a good network for this, but maybe you're really good at writing email sequences, and there's companies that might pay you some couple $1,000s to write email sequences, or, maybe you're really good at assessing enterprise deals and being able to provide guidance and strategy on how to get those done. Also an opportunity to do freelance work. That is, another option. I have several colleagues that have done like cold calling as a service, where if they were in between roles, they would just kind of use their network to say, hey, I'll come in and I'll make dials on behalf of your business and try to generate some leads. You can either pay me a flat retainer for that monthly, or, a per lead basis or something like that. That's, the per lead is a little more risky if you're out of work completely, but these are all options that most every seller, even early on in their career, should have access to, right? Or you can come in and make cold calls on behalf of a business. Also go to Craigslist and some of those places to see if there's like other temporary roles you can jump into. But these are all, by the way, just to buy time for you to slow down a little bit and be strategic about your approach for finding the next great sales role and doing your research on the company you're going to go join and the product and those things.
Well, I think in this episode, we gave you some tactics and tips for when you need to pull that, if and when. And if you do find yourself in that, my biggest suggestion is reach out to people, reach out to your network and ask for help. Don't just keep it in. And one of the things that I always do on LinkedIn is reshare if somebody's looking for a role. I always try to help people find roles.
So let's actually talk a little bit about some things you can do there, and more in the context. So I think we got the how do you survive out of the way, get your house in order, pick up some freelance gigs, try to do some DoorDash or something to, if you don't have some runway, some savings on hand to get you through a few months. Again, under the context that right now it's probably going to take you 3 or 4 months to get a job, even best case, right? It may take longer than that right now, especially in tech, because there's so many applicants for every role. It's just going to take some time. And what you don't want to do is end up in a bunch of credit card debt because you're just trying to pay bills with that. You want to, not burn through and end up being in the hole at the end of all this. So now shifting gears, what are some things you can do to find the right role? Network with people using LinkedIn, Twitter, and other tools. And how can you work smarter, not harder? Because one of the things that's really overwhelming when you're out of work or in between roles is like, how do I narrow this down to a very tight list? And then how do I improve my odds of getting the role that I want? It can feel very overwhelming if you're like, there's thousands of openings, or maybe there's not enough openings. Either scenario is kind of stressful. How do you focus in on the few very strategic opportunities and then win those interviews and get those next steps and ultimately get that offer letter? So you mentioned one really early on in the episode here about recruiters. I do always do that whenever, from time to time, I even do that when I'm still employed, by the way. From time to time, I'll go back and re-engage recruiters that have reached out over the years. One, to make sure that they don't have something interesting that might be a great fit, confirming that I'm getting paid as much as I can get paid, but also just to keep those relationships warm. So if I ever need them, it's someone I can call on in a, pretty quick notice and say, hey, I'm in between roles. Would love to hear what you're working on right now. So nurture those people in your inbox on InMail. Probably lots of people have the outreach from recruiters. I try to stay in touch with them as much as you can. The other thing that I've seen a lot of people doing in the last year and in this year also is try to connect with the people who would be your peers at the companies you want to work for. So maybe first narrow down to 10 companies that you'd be interested in working for and focus on trying to get a role at one of those 10 companies versus trying to spray 150 applications out. Because if you can focus in on making a really great story for why you should work at those 10 companies, you'll do a better job than if you're just blasting out 150 resumes on Monster. Is Monster still around? Yeah, on Indeed or whatever. So that's my recommendation is you niche down. So think about the industry you come from. One of the things I've seen lately is reps are having an easier time landing a role in the same category that they've sold in before. So it's probably not the best time right now to transition from selling MarTech to DevOps, because someone in a DevOps, a sales manager in a DevOps team is going to say, well, you're new to DevOps. I'd have to train you. We have 100 other applicants that have sold DevOps, so I'm probably going to pick one of those people, not someone who's trying to transition into a new category. So
you can speak the language,
pinpoint companies where you already know the marketplace, the buyer persona, some of those things. Focus in on maybe 10 of those, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then the old way used to be to go and like engage the CRO or the VP of sales on LinkedIn and try to go right to the top. And I obviously think going to the top in a sales cycle, if you're selling a product, is a great way to go. But what's happened is it's gotten so saturated. Everybody does that now. And VPs have just kind of tuned it out, or CROs have just tuned that out. So what a lot of people are doing now is connecting with other sellers on the team or other just team members. It could be marketing team members or operations team members, because most of these tech companies will pay a referral bonus for helping someone get placed if it's the right candidate for the company. And so they have some interest in helping people get the job. And so that's why, using cold outreach against people that are just going to be your peers at the company, networking with them, trying to get a conversation if you can, learning about the company. This also gives you a chance to ask some questions about the culture at the company and how people are performing there and what the day-to-day looks like. So it's kind of a win-win. You're back channeling the company, but you're also leveraging like a champion. So in the context of selling to an enterprise, it's the same concept of having a champion, which is build a champion at the company that's then going to put your resume in front of the leadership. And coming from them, it'll be a lot more powerful than even reaching out up above them to the CRO or the VP. I think you could still do that in some companies, but I just think at this point it's so saturated. Everybody's doing that what I'm hearing from a lot of VPs in my network is they're just tuning that out anyway. So that's, some other ways you can use LinkedIn, use other social networks. There's Reddit, there's Twitter, there's TikTok, there's all kinds of other platforms where there's people talking about things. So maybe you can find ways to network with people that work at the companies you want to work for. And what else? Thoughts on that?
There's riches and niches, so it makes it a lot easier. If you already have the tech speak in a certain area, it's just going to make you ramp faster and be able to step ahead of people that don't have the experience in a role.
Yeah.
So
something else that I'd recommend is beyond just like the resume. So part of my coaching focuses on this too. Subtle plug for my coaching is I don't think people are impressed by a resume anymore. I think you have to have one. It's one of those like check boxes that you've got to have. But one of the challenges with hiring salespeople is salespeople are really good at interviewing for the most part, because if you can speak well and you're a storyteller and you have a lot of passion, then you can get by. The problem is now leaders are wanting to vet people like that a lot more. So especially more experienced roles, you want to actually be able to show your work. Mm-hmm. I can sit and talk about deals, but can I show my process and my operating procedure? So one of the things I focus on in my coaching is how to do a 90-day plan, right? How do we build a framework or something that's a deliverable that you can bring to an interview with a hiring manager or a VP of sales or a CRO or a CEO or whoever that actually shows the work you've done in the past and then applies that methodology to how you're going to work at their company in the future. So kind of a cool concept. And it's one of those things that really sets you apart in your candidacy. Like they're going to choose the candidate that spent time building something to showcase how they're bringing something to the table, their knowledge, their experience, their Rolodex, whatever that is. You can package that up into a slide deck and bring that to a job interview and really wow people. And it's a fine art. It's kind of uncomfortable the first few times you do it, but the more times you do it, you realize like this is a great way to show what you're planning to do in your first 90 days in the role, how you're going to apply past knowledge to this role, how you're going to measure yourself for success, and those kind of things you can actually package up and put, and it's going to improve your odds of getting that next step in the interview process. So one is, kind of getting the at-bats is going to come from networking, like you're saying, Chase. But then the other part of it is passing the interview and being like very, very sure that you're in the top 1% of the candidate pool. And maybe the number one, right? How do you get yourself as the candidate to the top of the stack? I would say putting together something that proves your past results and your knowledge is the best way to do that.
And going to an episode that we're going to be dropping soon with an agency coach, I mean, he talked about gifting a lot. And one of the things that helped me when I had my valet company was I would actually write handwritten letters and send them to prospects after I met with them. And sometimes that you can just, after you had an email or a interview with somebody, send them a note.
Yeah. How do you do that? I'm curious. How do you do that in COVID age with people working remote and stuff? I shouldn't say COVID age. We're kind of out of that, I hope. But like in the remote work world, how do you make sure a handwritten letter gets to, say, a VP of sales that you're interviewing with?
It's a great question. And it goes to where at the end of the meeting, you have to ask for that information. And you got to say, hey, I know this is going to sound strange, but I would like to follow up with a handwritten letter to you. Can I get your address?
Boom. Perfect.
Ask. Yeah, you got to make the ask.
Someone asked me that recently that I was talking to on LinkedIn. They were like, hey, because I had mentioned that play in one of my previous episodes, which was I always try to send a handwritten note when I'm interviewing for a role. And someone asked, like, how do you do that in a remote world? And honestly, you could still probably send it to their HQ and the HQ would likely forward it if they have an HQ. Someone at the front office could probably forward it to their home address if the person works from home. But I think your way is even better, which is just ask. And even asking in real time is just going to show that you're thinking ahead to the next step and you're planning your approach for how to keep the conversation alive and going, right? Good stuff. And
it just makes you more human. And just make sure you follow through once you get the address and actually send the letter and not just sit on your hands.
Yeah. Yeah. So handwritten notes, follow-up thank you notes, emails, networking with people on the team. I'm trying to think if we missed anything else that would be strongly recommended.
Potentially looking for, and this goes back to like those VC groups of companies that have recently gotten funding because they might be hiring for new roles.
Yeah.
But I think we gave a lot of tactical steps on this episode. And again, just reach out to Jesse or I. We're here to help. And we do have a Slack community, so join that. And you can join our email list as well at thesalesplayers.com.
Yeah. And one of the things just really quickly before we wrap up on the Slack, we try to, when we hear about opportunities, roles and things like that are open in our network, we try to post those in the community. So you definitely want to join. And there's a channel that's, I think we call it Jobs.
Mm-hmm. We do.
And we're trying to build, a pretty consistent job board for anybody who's looking, but we'd love to have you in the community. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. All right, that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.